Hey creatives, welcome back to the Almost Creative Podcast. You might see, if you're watching the video version, we are in a very different setup right now. We're pretty much sitting in a photographer's nightmare. We're sitting out in direct sunlight at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But you know what? It was a nice day and we wanted to do something different because we have our first returning guest on the podcast. John Gallagher is joining us again. How's it going, John?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's so good to be with you here in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, on this lovely property.
Dude, don't tell them where we are.
Oh.
No, I appreciate you flying in just for our podcast like you did last year where you flew in just for our podcast. No other reason, right?
Right.
So, no, you just got in here last night from Jacksonville,
I did.
Florida. How's Jacksonville been treating you?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
You know, we got an offer for a job in Jacksonville recently. No, we got a job offer in Jacksonville recently.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was like
legit?
some I don't know, 15 million, 10 million,
No
maybe
way.
5 million, but I had to turn it down.
15 million?
Yeah, I had to turn it down though.
Like, was it like legit or was it like a scam or something?
No, I mean, they wanted to pay me like 5 million, but you know, I wanted to hustle this video thing, you know? So,
Oh, yeah?
So I'm like, no, I can't do it. Yeah.
Like, how much of that hustle, like, what was the scope of the project?
You know, I don't know, but I was so younger, you know? So, and they wanted me there like this whole decade thing. Or
The
something.
whole decade?
So I think I made the right decision, you know? I turned it down.
Yeah, it sounds like you did.
Yeah. But anyhow, how have you been doing, John?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. It's so good to be with you here today. And, you know, I was just kind of thinking when I was driving in here, like, again, like that amount of time, I feel like I'm seeing you more frequently now in these last couple of years than in the last like decade.
Yeah.
So,
It's ironic we just did that little bit, but I actually just saw you in Jacksonville.
Yeah, you
not
did,
that long
in
ago.
April.
But technically the job wasn't in Jacksonville. We were in Georgia, but I had to drive back down to Jacksonville to fly out. So we got to see each other then, and it's been cool to catch up. But for those who didn't see the first episode you're on, quickly just give me like a background, like who is John Gallagher?
Yeah, so if you haven't seen the episode and want to know more about me, so basically I'm a 15-year accomplished media professional, and I basically create content, and I love actually kind of doing the reverse of asking questions and framing questions to pull out like meaningful stories for people and for testimonies and for promotional content. But I really loving seeing stories transform people's lives for the better.
That's awesome.
However that might be. So
yeah, have there been any like projects in particular you've been working on recently that you really liked?
Yeah, so actually for Father's Day, there was a particular gentleman who was a retired Air Force for 25 years. And initially when he was married, like quite a few years ago, like I think 30 plus years ago, his wife couldn't have children. And so they eventually did have a daughter, but then after that, you know, his wife experienced some significant medical difficulties. And so as a result, the doctors say, hey, you can't have any more children. And so that was really discouraging for them, but it led them to a path of looking for adoption. And so they did eventually adopt as well. And that was completely life-changing for, you know, their daughter and for their family, and taught them a lot of lessons. And then from there, we also filmed him being a part of the prison, you know, different things where he is like a father type pastoral role for prison ministry. And there's a lot of men in prison that have had a lot of difficulties with identity issues with their fathers. And that's actually some of the more common themes is when you have dysfunctional families, it can really kind of distort certain, you know, decisions that you make that are pivotal in your life's future. And so he's basically like another father to these men, and really has been life-changing. And one gentleman in particular at the prison, life was able to reconcile with his dad and brought him peace, even with his relationship with God as a result. So that was really neat to see and hear his story from that. So
yeah, it's such an interesting story. How do you take a story like that and then tell it in a format like video? Because I feel like, you know, someone hears that story, it's like, okay, this is all great, but how do you get that across in a short form type of video?
Yeah, and it can be especially challenging when you don't necessarily know the full extent of the story beforehand.
Yeah.
And you didn't really live that particular life's experience as well in the process. So what I usually do is I usually like to see what are the emotional touch points You know, because you probably know this now, but like when you're doing an interview, it's more psychological, you know, than just you know, rational. So I try to find, you know, where does he start, you know, to start to cry or kind of swell up in his eyes, or I'm paying attention to a lot of his nonverbal communication as well. And when I kind of read that, and I can kind of see where this can pivot. And also Holy Spirit helps me too at different occasions. And then, you know, as you experience, you know, and you kind of do it time, you kind of have this instinct, you know, you kind of have that smell. Like when a chef is making food and he tastes that food, he's like, oh yeah, that is it. That's the right amount of ingredients, you know, for it. So over time you kind of know, okay, yeah, that's the 5-star taste that you're looking for. So really it's about, I kind of ask 30,000-foot questions. And then from there, I kind of zoom in like an eagle and kind of really point and zoom in on what that particular touch point is really affecting them emotionally. And usually from there, they become more comfortable and they usually share more as a result, because that made an impact. And then when people see that on camera, they really can feel that transcend on screen, where it's not like stiff and awkward and robotic and kind of premeditated scripted, but it's very organic and ethereal, where people are like, wow, like this is legit. This is not just him just like spouting out something. So when it kind of transfers from just like information to like an emotional experience, then that's where it really meshes together fully.
Yeah, that's great. You know, one of the things you kind of made me think of when you're talking is how important the questions are that you ask. And I've seen kind of both sides where, you know, we might have a job and their marketing person or whoever it is wants to ask the questions, but they're so surface level. So we're not getting anywhere really with their questions. But then I've had others who are really listening and they're willing to go off script to get like the real answers. And from doing something like this podcast, I feel like it's actually improved like our brand films and our testimonial films, because I'm having to do this conversation right now here on the spot with someone. It does make it easier that I know you, but you know, I've also had guests that I don't really know that well. And so to be able to not only ask them surface level questions, but then to listen to their answer and to dissect that answer and maybe find a question off of that answer they gave you, that becomes like the whole conversation. And so because of that, like I was saying, our brand films and our testimonial films, I feel like have gotten better because we have people saying better things, and it's not just like the surface level answer you normally get.
Yeah, I mean, the reputation of your business is the currency of the economy. It's like the engine that propels your business. So if you have a fantastic reputation, that's going to continue to lead great strides in, you know, better clients and better, you know, people that you're working with over time. But if you have a bad reputation, it's going to sting you in the butt later on. It really will. So when we look at all the popular brands as well, and popular, you know, brands that we, you know, kind of use on a daily basis, like our iPhone, for example, or, you know, just even our cars, there's a story behind them. And we buy in not to necessarily the features of what that technology provides to us, but we really buy into the story of what it means to us as a person. It's more like identity, like you connect to the identity of the story. You can feel like, okay, I could connect to this. And so because I could connect to it, then, you know, it makes me feel a certain way. There's a certain emotional, you know, feeling invoked in that emotion from that story that, you know, company shares, just like with Apple, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so true. Someone gave me this analogy one time when I was trying to get better at sales and asking questions, and they basically painted the picture of like a bike shop, and you have two different types of bike shops. The one bike shop, you know, this older gentleman comes in and they're just trying to sell him on features. He's like, oh, I'm looking for a bike. And they're not really asking questions. They're just like, well, how about this bike? This bike is a 21 speed. How about this bike? This bike has a comfortable seat. And they're just trying to offer him different like features of the bikes, and they're not really finding out why he's at the bike shop. Whereas the other bike shop, as soon as the guy comes in, they don't even show him bikes yet. They're asking him questions. Oh, why are you in the market for a bike? And then he starts to open up. He's like, well, you know, I have grandkids now and I want to do something with them. And like, oh, okay. Like, so are you looking to kind of match their speed, or like, are they going to be riding their own bikes? Or are they riding on your bike? And then they start kind of asking questions and almost being like a doctor in the situation of like, what is your problem? And can we solve that problem with one of our bikes? Whereas the other guy is just like, oh, okay, I just want to sell you this bike, or I'll sell you this bike. And they're not really like finding out what's wrong with them. And I think that translates over into what we do, where, you know, I feel like many videographers or photographers or other business owners, really, when I talk to them and they say like they're not booking after a call, you know, like if I ask them how often they're talking, they're like all the time, you know, whether they know it or not, they're the ones doing all the talking and they're not really listening to the person. Whereas like we really need to listen because they have a story that they're trying to tell, but they maybe can't get it out. So we're trying to listen and then ask more questions. I think even, you know, I've had some, especially like with couples, like when it comes to weddings, I've had some like really tough cookies where like they just don't want to crack. It's like, why? Oh, like what are you most excited about your wedding? Oh, you know, the ceremony or whatever. You know, like they don't have a lot to say. And so then I'll try to dig deeper. I'm like, well, you said ceremony. Like, why did you say the ceremony? And then it still might be surface level. They're like, well, you know, my parents got married there. And I'm like, oh, that's something. Tell me more about that. Like, when did your parents get married? And now they start kind of lighting up a little bit more because they're starting to talk about something that they connect with, you know, and then you start finding out that the church is actually extremely important to her because of that. But if you would have kind of just stopped with that first question of like, what are you most excited about? She said ceremony and you moved on. Now you've missed like this crucial part of their story and what's important to them.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Donald Miller with StoryBrand, and he provided this framework from Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey.
Yeah.
And in this is basically kind of a cyclical story cycle that's presented. And actually, a lot of this framework was from certain ancient stories, such as the Odyssey, where you see basically, you know, a particular person that is on an adventure where they are then experiencing certain pain points, certain trials and tribulations. And in that process, they become like who they were actually destined to be, or you find out who they actually become and who they are based upon those challenges that they experience in their journey. And then from there, they meet a guide that helps posture them and mentor them. And actually, Star Wars as well is a great model for the hero's story or the hero's journey as well, where you have the guide like Yoda, for example, that gives, you know, Luke that advice to help him become, you know, the hero in the story. And so from a business standpoint, a lot of businesses think that they are the hero, but that doesn't set you up for success, because then that postures and positions you as you are not being that servant leader to your client, and really you try to become this, you know, big, you know, ego person with your business, where you actually are the God in the story for your client or your customer becoming the hero in their story, where they have that transformation that takes place for them to succeed in their business or in their, you know, wedding experience, or in that event that transform the lives of those people because of what was shared to help them in their business. And they come out to the other end becoming this new version of themselves.
That book is great. Donald Miller's book. I mean, if viewers haven't listened or read that book,
I love the book.
Especially in our industry, I think it's so important, because what we're essentially doing is telling stories. So then for you to be able to tell a story of what your brand is and tell their story, it's like, I feel like it's almost like required reading if you want to be a creative entrepreneur. You know?
Absolutely. So, no doubt about it.
That's great. So, you know what's interesting is we're talking about story, and like you see this in movies a lot, where like a movie could have amazing technology behind it, the newest equipment, it could look great, but the story is not good and it bombs. So it's interesting, like how us as creatives, a lot of times we're so focused on the technical, but it really is like the story is like what is going to sell someone at the end of the day.
Story is king. At the end of the day. And a lot of times what happens is the conflict is not significant enough for us to really buy into us establishing a certain emotional buy-in to those characters. So if those characters don't have proper, you know, character development, and we don't see them wanting something that we care about, and them having to, you know, basically at their wits' end have this significant conflict, because we all experience conflict in our lives on a daily basis in certain capacities, whether it's seasonal or just in different, you know, times of our life. And so when we don't see conflict in what we're seeing on a movie or on a TV show, it's almost like you don't care because it's hard for you to connect in the challenges that you have in your own story. Because a lot of us, we like to kind of maybe position ourselves in some of the characters on the screen, you know, and kind of see, you know, what would we do if we were that person on screen, you know, if we were doing that conflict. But if the conflict is just an easy resolution, then it doesn't really provide any emotional buy-in to why we should care about the destination. Because a lot of times what a lot of people do, or not us, but a lot of filmmakers do, is they focus a lot about the destination and the end result, but they don't really focus on the process and the journey of getting to that destination, where you see, you know, like how did they respond to those challenges along the way that really make that initial end result, or that what happened at the end, you know, really meaningful.
Yeah. So would you say the conflict is kind of what makes the story?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The conflict, and then what happens to the character through the conflict. Because it can even either make them a villain or a hero, or it can make them stagnant at well. Like, they don't change at all. It'll transform either way. So yeah, you have to have conflict. Otherwise, there's no point in it. So if you're seeing just explosions and, you know, like Michael Bay type of stuff, but there's like, what is the point with the explosions and all this if it's not leading up to something that is providing, you know, a challenge to the characters, then it's just all eye candy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. To make it more practical, because, you know, a lot of the people who listen to this podcast aren't necessarily making big budget movies or anything, or short films. You know, they're working on commercial or weddings or things like that. So I want to throw a few examples over to you, and you kind of explain like how there's conflict and resolution in something like that. So so like, let's take a wedding video, for example. Like you're saying, if for it to have a good story, it needs conflict and a resolution. What's because like on the outside, as a wedding videographer, you might be thinking like, well, there shouldn't be conflict because it's a wedding, you know, but like if it's going to be a good story, it needs conflict. So what's the conflict in that wedding film?
So like, I would say like, this guy is interested in this gal, but she was giving him like a really hard time with him, you know, him trying to pursue her, but she was giving a hard time on, you know, like, you know, her liking him. And then maybe like, you know, she started to like him, but, you know, she kept turning him down, just giving him a hard time. And then eventually, like, she realized, well, you know, maybe this guy is like actually like a decent, solid guy, and, you know, is like really like has his worth weight in gold. And sometimes it can even be reversed too. But it seems like most of the time it's that kind of scenario where the woman is really, you know, doing a lot of testing to the guy to see, you know, is he the real deal or not, you know?
And what I would say too is like, if someone's like, no, really, like my couple, they have no interesting story, you know, because there are sometimes couples where it is just like they met in high school. They dated since high school. They're now getting married. But I think within the arc of that wedding film, you still have conflict and a resolution. You have a climax point, essentially. And everyone does their wedding videos different, but I know like for ours, there's always one main climax of the film, and that's when the bride comes down the aisle. That's what you're building to, and that payoff essentially is. And so what I'd almost say the conflict is like these two people have to do all this stuff to get ready for their wedding, and they want to see each other, and they're so excited for this day, and they want to make it official, but you're like building to that. So it's almost like, and maybe conflict's not even the right word, I'm not sure, but it's like essentially that is like a conflict. It's not conflict like we would think in a movie where it's like, oh, this villain took over this thing. But there is a conflict there because, you know, they are anticipating this moment, and you're building as like the editor and the filmmaker, you're building up to this payoff, and then you might even tease them with it, you know, like we've done some where it's non-linear. So it's like, you know, you show some of the getting ready, you show him standing at the aisle, you show the door like starting to open, and then we go to something else, you know, and then maybe we're giving more narration, or we're giving more story or something, or maybe like you're using some of their story to help fill in the pieces. So it's like maybe you can only film the wedding day, but you know, like dad's talking about it in his speech about how he didn't know if like he was the right guy or not or whatever, and it's like, oh, I don't want to give away my daughter or something. So you're using those lines as we're trying to get to this point of like the bride coming down the aisle. And I think it's like, and then the payoff is obviously they see each other, and now they're married, and then, you know, they get to celebrate, and that's kind of like the conclusion to the thing. And so I think even in like those simple things, it could be very easy to be like, well, there's no story there, but there is. It's just, it's different than like what you might think with a movie. So
And what you're doing with that is you are building up to that pinnacle, right? And so you're not necessarily showing the resolve right away. You're showing like, you know, like all these different elements, family dynamics, maybe financial aspects, you know, and just different logistical aspects pertaining to that wedding being able to be successful,
Right.
and maybe some other pinnings of the story between both of them getting up to that point, you know, you know, and so you're not showing, you know, you're showing certain contextual clues to bring that reward of the bride, but you're not just not giving any context, and you're showing, you're trying to tailor it to that couple, to show how unique their stories are when they come together as one.
Yeah. Another example, and this is an industry that I'm familiar with, and you're probably pretty familiar with too, being in like the church world, but like nonprofits, like where I've seen nonprofit videos go wrong is where they try to be too happy about what they do. And maybe you've seen those videos, but it's just like, look how great it is. It's so good what we do for people. And like, it's not really, I mean, it's good eye candy, I guess, but it's not really tugging on the heartstrings at like the core value. The ones I see that do really well, and the ones we try to do, is you're embracing the problems, you know, like if it's like, say it's a nonprofit that, you know, focuses on mental health, you know, you're talking about the issues of like, there are this many people that have these problems and we only have this much funding, and like this is where this person was before they found our organization. So imagine how many more people are like that out there that we can't get to because we don't have enough funding. And essentially the resolution to this problem will be, hey, can we get more funding to impact more people like you're seeing in this video? And that's where I feel like that's where they get high donations, and that's where people are touched emotionally. But yeah, when it's like all like happy, good, you know, stuff, I don't feel like anyone takes away anything from that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem real because it's almost like you're in this like rainbow unicorn type of reality where it's like there must be some type of tug and pull somewhere. So if it feels very cookie cutter and like perfect, it's hard for people to buy in, because then it almost feels like it's a scam because everything's perfect and it's not. There, you know, there's no, like, you can't really get to them the organic level of okay, like this is like what's actually going on. This is like, you know, we're trying to help a need here, and you know, this is how this need is solving this problem. But it's not, you know, not-for-profit is really not really a profit versus non-profit type of basis. It's more of a, you know, how is this not-for-profit making a difference? Like you were mentioning, it's more of a difference making. It's not necessarily about making money or not making money or needing money, but once people see how it's making a difference and the reach of it and the stories that come from it and people's lives changing, then people buy into the vision first. And once they buy into the vision, then that's where the money comes. So if you try to show the money, then the vision, it's vision first.
Exactly.
And then that lays the groundwork for then people to invest and buy into that vision. So you can't just say people, hey, I need money, and then you don't have any. People are not going to give to something where there's no vision. Or if it
looks too good, then it's like, why do you need my money? You know,
like
kind of thing.
Too polished, too perfect.
It's like, why it looks like you guys are perfectly fine. Like, you don't need any more funding. So
it's a fine line. It's a fine line.
I know last time you were on, we were talking about Christian media a little bit too. And I think that's like really at the root of it. You know, there was this turning point where people were like, oh, Christian movies like don't suck anymore. Or Christian movies are like, or TVs are not. And a lot of that was the story, because like I do feel like old Christian movies of like the 2000s and stuff, like there wasn't really like they didn't almost want to have conflict, because it was like, this is supposed to be G-rated, we're family friendly, you know, and like making it like, and then if there was conflict, it was usually like there was this like one bad atheist or something, and like that's the villain of the thing, and like it wasn't believable conflict either, you know. It was like, okay, like like some people can be like tools, but it doesn't mean like everyone who doesn't believe in Jesus is like a terrible person or something. But that's how a lot of these movies were kind of painted. Like it wasn't believable, or there just wasn't conflict. And I think that's where they've gotten so good, is like they embrace the imperfections, which really, like those are the kind of people like Jesus called in the first place, were imperfect people. And so it just almost in a crazy way, because of how Christian media has changed, it's more Christ-like, because that's like the kind, well, not Christ is perfect obviously, but more like the disciples Christ was calling, like this type of media. It's showing our imperfections and making us more relatable to any person, because it's like, oh, they're not on a pedestal, they're just like us, and this is the kind of stories and the conflicts they go through.
Yeah, it's becoming more of a human experience.
Right, that's a good way to put it.
It's not necessarily something where you feel like it's just, you know, written on paper without the human in mind. So when you're seeing that human experience, like you're saying, the imperfections, you're seeing kind of that raw emotion that takes place, you know, in that human experience. You feel you can connect as a human, you know, and now we have AI, where it's really bizarre. Like AI, you know, they're all trained by humans, but AI has never lived a human experience. So it doesn't know what it's like to go through any type of emotions or pain or challenges or difficulties.
Yeah.
So when you're using AI to like write a script or write something, it's literally the verbiage is going from what it thinks based upon other humans it as, but it doesn't really understand the journey of the human experience,
Yeah.
of what it takes to experience what that's like.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it can feel very robotic, or all of a sudden, like the transformational aspect or the change or the impact just becomes very fast, very rapid. And that's because AI has not experienced any emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it doesn't know what really conflict is. It thinks it knows what it is based upon certain language surrounding those patterns, but it doesn't really know how that connects to, like, you know, the human life.
Yeah,
journey.
it's like the story doesn't feel like real. Like one thing I was doing with my daughter is I was having her give me like characters and a place and the weather and what's the problem, and then we put it all into like ChatGPT or Claude and ask it to give like a bedtime story. And really, all it's doing, like, there is a story there, I guess, but it's really just trying to check off, did I say all these things that you gave me at some point? There's really no real like moral of the story that comes from it, or like any payoff. Maybe if you kept talking to it, it could eventually get there, but from the surface level, it's just like, oh, you told me you wanted these characters featured at this weather, so I'm gonna just make sure I say those at some point. But there's really not like because it doesn't understand like how a story actually plays out.
Yeah, it doesn't, because it never lived through it.
Right, exactly.
So it's basically like a brain without any human, you know, body parts and faculties.
Yeah.
You know, it's so it's really interesting.
So a zombie, basically.
Yeah, basically a zombie. A
very
brain.
smart zombie that could probably take over the world one day.
Zombie brain. I mean, not to dismiss AI at any means, but that's just what the danger of AI is, that you sometimes are tricked into seeing the lack of value of what the human experience shows in the progression of your journey, of that particular payoff, that outcome. And if those layers and levels don't try to traverse through that experience, because usually it's a question on top of many other questions that are being solved. And actually, that's the thing with AI now, is you can be really good with AI by knowing how to critically think of how to ask the right questions. And that's like the big thing right now, is that people don't know how to ask questions. And if you don't know how to ask questions, then you really don't know how to tell a good story. Because questions provoke and provide a means in which you're providing the why, the how, the who, the when, and the where, in which, you know, how did this character tick? Why is this character wanting this? You know, how does it take for them to achieve that? You know, and it just becomes, then you create the world out of those questions. And then when you don't answer those questions, but then it leaves off with more questions, like a mystery, then as a human experiencer, if you will, you're like, oh, I want to know how that human is able to answer that question or solve that question. You know?
That's great.
So,
do you feel like there was a turning point for you where it did become less about the technology itself and more about the storytelling?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think technology is a fantastic tool that we master, but we don't let technology master us. And I think technology is a wonderful, beautiful thing. But if you're going to offload your brain to technology to a certain extent, I think we need to be careful with how that is done from a creative standpoint. I think administratively, I think it's fantastic, but from a creative story standpoint, I think then you risk yourself into really realizing, you know, how does value of the story bring to that human emotional connection at the end of the day. And kind of the dark night of the soul, which is a part of the hero's journey as well. And there's certain different hero models or story frameworks as well. But people really want to know what it's like to experience how people respond to pain and challenges and difficulties, because we want to know like how they were able to survive it, and how they were able to become who they were to become from it as well.
Yeah. Has there ever been a project you've had to work on where you're like, I don't know how we're going to pull a story out of this?
Yeah, there's some people where they initially don't necessarily know how to articulate their story, or they haven't really thought through their story initially. I can't think of a particular example right now off the top of my head, but a lot of the times I like to have people think that this is more like, a story time, coffee date, then then you having to be like super formal and feeling like it'd be super scripted and say all the right perfect words.
Yeah.
And so when it's like, I just, I don't care if you say who knows, you knows, or whatever. I just want to hear what you have to say if you're talking to a friend that cares about your story, or a new friend. And so when you kind of lay that framing and that standard, then it makes them feel more relaxed and they start to pour out more. So I really found that making that person feel calm and relaxed and safe with you, then they kind of let their guard down, and then they let the floodgates open. And it doesn't matter if they're introvert, extrovert, or in between, they'll still eventually open up to you once they feel safe to share it with you. So it's really about providing that level of safety for them initially, where that whole psychological element comes in I was sharing earlier.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point of just building that comfort before they come in. And I actually think that developed for me from seeing really good portrait photographers and how they handle that, because it's the same kind of concept in a lot of ways, where you're trying to get, there's the headshots you see where it's like, it was obviously just like a batch of different people and they all just stood in front of a backdrop and that was it. And we do that stuff too, like, I'm not saying anyone who does that, like, we do that stuff all the time, but then you have like the real portraits where it's like that photographer's probably spending like 30 minutes, maybe more with you. And a lot of that is like maybe 10 minutes of just making you feel comfortable before they even take out the camera. And I think it's the same way with interviews, and that's where I had adapted that was from the portrait photographers and then bringing it over to the interview stuff, because it is very nerve-wracking for someone who's not on camera often to have all of a sudden not just cameras but lights, and now you're putting a mic on them. There might be other people in the room like listening in as well. And so you just want to make it really clear with them from the start. Like I always require that, like, before we even start recording, they're aware of like a few facts. Like those facts are, you can have no wrong answers because this is all edited. This isn't live. We're not looking for full paragraphs from you. We're just looking for little sound bites. So as long as you can say little sound bites, like we can remove your if you stutter, if you mess up, just say, hey, I messed up. Like there's nothing you can really do wrong because it's all digital and we can chop this all up later. If you don't like the way you said something, don't worry about it. And then I also just like, I reassure them, like, this is like coming from your own words. So like, we're not going to hear my questions. So I just want you to stay back, like my questions and your answers. So, like, how's the weather? You wouldn't say warm. You would say the weather today is warm. I always kind of let them know that of like, this is about you. It's not my questions. I'm just giving you questions to try to help you speak, and so and I think that goes a long ways. And then you'd say, like, are the first few questions like our throwaway questions anyhow? It's like I have them just say and spell their first and last name. I'm just like, okay, who are you? Okay, you said your role is this. What does that mean? I kind of get them some layup questions before we get into the more meaty stuff, so then they can just kind of start feeling comfortable. And then probably within like 5 minutes, they're just like talking and they kind of forget that all this stuff was going on, that's why I love interviews too, versus like talking to a teleprompter videos. Because I feel like if the person's not trained, they're just never going to do it well. Like every time we've had a bad experience with like on camera, it's like when we have to sit down like a CEO or someone who is never on camera, never in front of people, and you're expecting them to stare at this device and read a teleprompter. Like it just never goes well. Like they would do just so much better if like, we turn them, now they're talking to me. So
yeah, it can be intimidating for someone that hasn't done it initially, but when I do that type of thing, I'm like, hey guys, you can look at me. You don't look at the camera, look at me.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot too. But sometimes people can be sometimes insecure in themselves.
Yeah.
So you're almost like being like a mental health counselor, like all of a sudden, as well as a camera guy, and you know how they present themselves and what they share on, you know, on video will eventually translate on screen.
Yeah.
And either you can see how they are, you know, comfortable and confident in what they're sharing, or they can feel squirmy and awkward and like nervous and all these things.
And you don't want to call those things out per se. Like you want them to look good, but you want to like say it in a certain way where
you
it's
want to
like
identify it.
Yeah, exactly.
And help them. We're kind of like also a coach. So you're wearing like multiple hats.
Yeah.
You know.
Going back to the photographer example, I would say the best photographers I've ever met don't spend a lot of their time behind the camera. You know, they're putting the camera down, you're seeing their face, they're making eye contact with you, and then they pull up the camera and then it's back down. The ones I feel like struggle a little bit are the ones where it does feel like the camera is like glued to their face, you know?
Yeah, and they're not talking.
Yeah, and they're hiding behind the camera.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that it's easy to do that because a lot of creatives are introverts, so they want to hide behind the technology, you know? But like, you really need to be face to face, because going back to the interviews, it's like when I have an interview with someone and I'm looking at them, it's always just so much easier for them than when they're staring at a piece of technology.
Oh, absolutely. Because when you're able to talk to them, then you come down to their personal level, and it becomes not as awkward. And, you know, because, you know, anyone can take a photo now with their phone, but someone who cares about like the emotional response that's happening in those candid photos and how it's coming off, you know, on the camera, and the kids, if it's a family photo, stuff like that. I actually do some of that too, kind of on the side every once in a while. Like, it really transcends and provides that meaningful moment for them to cherish for the rest of their lives. And then it's like golden, because it's not stuff that, you know, they can just capture on a whim on their, you know, cell phone, for example. So, and actually, it's funny because about 10 years ago, I worked for Van Gogh, and I would take school photography. It would be about 200 photos a day with faculty, students, and staff. And you're exactly right. You know, you have to make them feel comfortable, you know, in an instant. And like whenever I approach someone, I'm quickly starting to talk to them, like, how's your day? How's your class? You know, and just try to embrace that baseline of human connection, like I care, like I genuinely care, not just to take a photo, but just to get to know you as a person in the 30 seconds that I have with you.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we Chris and I recently did an episode. I thought I was gonna be a little more slick than this, but I guess not. We recently did an episode called This or That. So I'm like, let me bring that back for John, but we'll do this or that storytelling edition.
Oh, cool. I love it.
All right, so I got a few just kind of quick answers, just kind of off the cuff.
Okay.
Which one you'd pick. So, all right. So when it comes to editing, do you prefer linear editing or non-linear editing?
You know, that's a really good question. It depends on what content it is. So like, it's a recap video, I like to go linear with recap. If it's a narrative, depending on the story, sometimes, you know, like Nolan style, where you're maybe starting at the middle, and then, oh wait, where are we headed with this? It kind of cues you into then the rest of the story. But it really all depends on like the content and you know, how you're trying to engage in that first, you know, 20 seconds with that video.
I think for the most part, I fall under non-linear for like most things, even like recap. I mean, it might, for the majority of it is probably linear, but like, I do really like starting with like a hook or something, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
To reel them in. And it might be from the very end of the day. It might be from, you know, the middle. Is like, I always like to kind of have something, and then maybe we kind of go through in order, you know. And so always having a little bit of that. But I do really appreciate like when non-linear is done well, because I also non-linear, or it just seems like they're trying to be non-linear, but it doesn't make any sense. You know, like especially you see that a lot in weddings where it's like, we're bouncing around all over the place, but there's no reason for it. Like usually when I'm trying to do there's a reason for it. Like, okay, we hear dad speaking and he's talking about the first time he saw his daughter when she was born. So it's like, let's show him walking her down, or, you know, like, and then maybe that's not the moment of the day we're at, but it lines up so well. Like, let's connect them together so it flows. So
yeah, you're exactly right. Like the beginning of nonlinear has to hit a home run, otherwise the rest of it is not gonna work. So yeah, it has to be the setup for sure.
Cool. Next one, show or tell.
show or tell. I like showing.
Okay.
Showing is more mysterious. Telling is too boring.
Yeah.
Because then it's more predictable, and then you don't have that buy-in right away.
Yeah.
So it's more show. You know, actions speak louder than words, right? So people are more wired for show because tell is a more easier payoff.
Yeah, going back to the nonprofit thing, I think a lot of nonprofits try to tell everything versus show.
Yeah.
And we recently did one. I kind of wish we leaned more into it. And I think if we work with them again, I would want to lean into it.
Yeah.
We had some parts where it was just nat sound and showing the person. And I was like, man, we should have did more of that because it just felt better to me than just hearing people talk about like the things they do. I don't know, there was something about it that I felt like, and again, I guess you're hearing, so it's not just seeing like the show part, but just like that raw sound with seeing the visual. Sometimes I think it just goes like way farther than someone you sat down in an interview and they're just talking everything out.
And they're probably all approaching what they do differently, which makes it more interesting. It's the same type of work, but they're all, you know, tackling it in a different manner, which makes it more interesting, like a snowflake. There's no, you know, same snowflake, but they all land on the ground. They all have the same destination, but it's like that journey process we were talking about earlier is what, that's what really, you know, kind of hooks people in, for lack of a better word, at the end of the day. So that's so good.
Would you rather plan the story before the shoot or find it later in the edit?
I would say for like a documentary, I have found that I really don't know the story. I sometimes have a main idea to what the story is, but sometimes the story can become more fascinating, interesting once I interview those people and their experiences. Then I can really find, oh wait, this is like the niche which makes this whole story stand out from maybe initially what I initially anticipated that main idea to be. So I liked it for being a discovery and not necessarily being, you know, just hard-headed to, this is the idea, gotta stick to it, can't change it. And I feel like if you do that, then you kind of miss on like some golden moments of greater depth.
Yeah, that one's kind of hard for me to answer because I feel like it's a little bit of both. It's like,
it is.
With a plan, but you don't want to stick so close to the plan that you can't adapt if something comes along, you know? So that makes a lot of sense.
I think plan is more easy when it comes to just pure narrative scripting, but when it comes to like documentary, it's more of a discovery.
Yeah. All right, last one. What is more important, music or the sound effects?
I would say music is more key because it lays kind of that subconscious bedrock of aiding to what is happening. I think it was Hans Zimmer was saying that, you know, music is just as important, and you know, the soundtrack is just as important than what you're seeing visually, and it can either distract or provide that aid to what is being visually expressed on screen. And so I think it'd be a great enhancer if you know how to optimize that sound, where the sound effects in a sense have to really be purpose driven and not just you know, effects for the sake of effects.
I don't think I could part with one or the other. Like I'd have to have both, but definitely like sound effects, it's like the depth, it's like that extra layer of depth that I can take the video. But like the music is just like so key. Like when I really think about what is like stirring stuff up in people, it's like the strings and the keys, like that with what they're seeing. I think at least that's what happens to me, because like if I hear the music as it's going with the edit, all of a sudden I start feeling something, you know. And I think that's common in people, is like those certain types of tones and instruments, like when you hear it with a certain, seeing it with the certain type of visual, it tugs on you. And I'm talking from an emotional standpoint, but it's the same with like getting hyped up or something too. Like if it's an upbeat, you know, song, it like gets you excited with the video as well. So
it sets the mood and the atmosphere from what you're seeing visually speaking. And if it's not supporting it, then it would distract you either way. You know, you don't want to be distracted.
Where it's like bad. I think you see, I mean, it's a lot in corporate stuff. Going back again, we'll keep using the nonprofit example. You know, it's happy, giddy videos they do. It's also the music is all happy and giddy and corporate. Like, you're not coffee. You shouldn't sound corporate. You know? Like, you need to find something that more driving and ups and downs to the music, and not just this like constant, we're happy corporate, you know, music.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. That's all I have.
Really?
We can throw the paper out. Unless you got anything else? I don't have anything else. So.
Well, this has been such a blast conversation, being here in these this open field.
Yeah.
I feel like this is like post World Cup story time.
You know, my original idea I was gonna pitch to you is we'll play a game of pickleball or tennis.
Really?
We're doing the thing, but Chris didn't like that idea. He said it'd be too much work. So.
Oh, well, maybe in
He
the
doesn't
future.
like a lot of work. So.
Oh, I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
I'm on both sides of the
I
aisle,
don't wanna
so
follow me around while I'm playing pickleball. So.
yeah. But this has been such a blast.
Yeah.
Thank you again for, having this dialogue. I hope that what we shared today will really help people in crafting their stories and connect for them, for their businesses, for their success.
Yeah, I think that's
So-
great. If anyone wants to find you, John, where should they look for you?
So you
Besides
can-
in Jacksonville.
Yeah, so you can go to GallagherJohn.com or talkswithgallagher.com or go to the same site. And actually, I have a creative quiz. So if you don't think you're creative, you can go there and take a quiz and see if you are really creative or not. So
And we'll have to put that in the description as well, so people can.
yeah, it will pop up right away, or you can see the button right there to take the quiz.
Okay, awesome.
So,
Well,
yeah.
thanks for joining us, John. And until next time, stay creative.